The sound of Mila Blackley's Mercedes purring to a stop 3 blocks from the cafe felt strange, almost rebellious. 32 years old, CEO of one of Seattle's fastest-growing tech firms, and here she was, deliberately hiding her success for a blind date. She slipped off her Cartier watch, tucking it into her purse, and replaced it with the simple Timex she'd bought yesterday. Trading her designer coat for a plain wool peacoat from a department store, she felt a twinge of guilt at the deception. But experience had taught her harsh lessons. Men changed when they learned about her wealth. They either became intimidated or saw her as a prize to be won. This time, she wanted someone to see her, not her bank account. As she walked toward Been There, Done That, the small coffee shop where they'd agreed to meet, Mila rehearsed her cover story. Web developer, decent salary but nothing extraordinary, renting a modest apartment, normal life. Just for the first date, she promised herself. If there's a second, I'll come clean. Inside, the cafe was warm and inviting, smelling of fresh coffee and cinnamon. She scanned the room, looking for a man with a blue scarf as they'd arranged. Her dating app matchup, Scott Reynolds, 34, software engineer, single dad to a 6-year-old daughter. She spotted him in the corner, his dark hair slightly tousled, broad shoulders hunched over a mug. The blue scarf was draped over the chair beside him. What caught her attention, though, was the intense concentration on his face as he examined what looked like a child's drawing. Taking a deep breath, she approached his table. Scott, his head jerked up, and the warm smile that spread across his face made her stomach flutter unexpectedly. Mila, hi, it's great to meet you. He stood, nearly knocking over his chair in the process. He was taller than she'd expected, with kind eyes and a day's worth of stubble that somehow made him look both rugged and approachable. Sorry about that, he said, gesturing to the drawing as they both sat down. My daughter Sophie has a school art show tomorrow, and she wanted me to rate this piece before she submits it. He turned the colorful crayon drawing toward Mila. What do you think? 5 stars, right? It was a charming, childish rendering of what appeared to be a man and a little girl holding hands in front of a small house with a massive rainbow overhead. Definitely 5 stars, Mila said, smiling. She's quite the artist. She'll be thrilled to hear that. She's been practicing all week. His pride was palpable, and Mila found it endearing. So, web developer, huh? What kind of projects do you work on? Mila launched into her prepared story, keeping details vague enough to be believable but specific enough not to raise suspicions. She'd done her research. As they chatted, she noticed subtle things about Scott. The worn edges of his wallet when he paid for their coffees, the way he carefully calculated the tip, the slightly frayed cuffs of his button-down shirt. He wasn't destitute, but he was clearly careful with money. So, single dad, she said after a while. That must be challenging. Scott's expression softened. It is, but Sophie's worth every second. Her mom left when she was too decided parenthood wasn't for her. He shrugged, but Mila could see the old pain there. We make it work, Sophie and me. I'm lucky that my company allows flexible hours so I can be there for school pickups and sick days. That's impressive, Mila said sincerely. A lot of parents struggle with that balance. Some days are better than others, he admitted. Last week, the babysitter canceled last minute before an important meeting. I ended up bringing Sophie to the office. She sat quietly coloring for almost an hour before announcing to my entire team that Daddy's bathroom smells funny. He chuckled. Not my finest professional moment. Mila laughed, finding his honesty refreshing. No pretense, no posturing, their conversation flowed easily from work to favorite books to travel dreams. Scott mentioned wanting to take Sophie to Disneyland someday, when the timing's right, and Mila recognized the careful phrasing of someone who had to budget for luxuries. When Scott suggested they take a walk along the nearby waterfront, Mila readily agreed. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, and a cool breeze carried the scent of salt water. I should warn you, Scott said as they strolled. If we end up seeing each other again, Sophie will want to meet you almost immediately. She thinks Daddy's dating life is the most exciting reality show ever. Does she meet everyone you date? Mila asked, curious about his boundaries. No, not at all. I'm actually pretty careful about that, but she knows when I'm going on dates and she always has questions. Lots of questions. He smiled ruefully. She's at that age where she's figuring out relationships. Last week, she asked if I was going to marry her teacher because Miss Wilson has pretty hair and no husband. Mila found herself smiling. And what did you tell her? That Miss Wilson does indeed have pretty hair, but that's not usually enough reason to marry someone. He glanced at Mila. I told her that when I meet someone special, she'll be the first to know. There was something so genuine about him, so unguarded. As they walked, Scott pointed out a place where he and Sophie fed the ducks on weekends, and a small playground where she'd lost her first tooth. His life was so intertwined with his daughters, and he spoke about her with such natural affection that Mila felt a tug of something unfamiliar, a longing for that kind of uncomplicated love. When they reached a row of high-end restaurants along the water, Mila instinctively started toward one before catching herself. On a software engineer's salary with a child to support, these places would be special occasion destinations, not casual first date spots. Scott seemed to read her thoughts. There's a great little place around the corner, Best Fish Tacos in Seattle, and they won't break the bank. The restaurant was a tiny hole in the wall with mismatched chairs and string lights, but the food was indeed delicious. When the bill came, Scott reached for it immediately. I've got this, he said. We could split it, Mila offered, thinking of her own salary, which was probably 10 times his. I asked you out, so it's on me, he insisted with a smile. Next time can be your treat if you want. Next time. The words hung between them, full of possibility. As they walked back toward the cafe where they'd started, Scott pointed out constellations appearing in the darkening sky, explaining that he was learning them to teach Sophie. She's convinced stars are magic, he said. I don't have the heart to tell her they're just giant balls of burning gas. Yet, at her car, an awkward moment arose when Mila realized she'd parked her Mercedes several blocks away. I'm just down that way, she said vaguely, pointing. I'll walk you, Scott offered. No, that's okay. It's not far, she said quickly. This was really nice, Scott. I had a wonderful time. He smiled, and in the glow of the streetlight, Mila thought he looked almost boyishly handsome. Me too. Would it be okay if I called you tomorrow? I'd like that, she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. He leaned in and kissed her cheek, his hand lightly touching her arm. The simple gesture sent warmth spreading through her. Good night, Mila. Good night. As she walked away, Mila touched the spot where his lips had brushed her skin. She had expected to feel guilty about her deception, but instead, she felt something else entirely, a lightness, a possibility. She found herself already looking forward to tomorrow's call. The next day, buried in meetings and quarterly projections at Blackley Tech headquarters, Mila kept checking her phone. When Scott finally called during her lunch break, she hurried to her private office to answer. Hey, she said, trying to sound casual. Hi there, he replied, his voice warming her despite the 30-story view of Seattle spread before her. I hope I'm not interrupting your workday. No, perfect timing actually, she said, conveniently omitting that she'd just stepped out of a board meeting. How's your day going? Pretty good. Sophie's art show was a big hit. Her rainbow masterpiece got an honorable mention, which in first-grade terms is basically winning the Pulitzer. Mila laughed. Congratulations to the artist. I'm sure she was thrilled. Ecstatic. She's decided art is her calling now. There was a pause. So I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner tomorrow night. I know it's short notice. I'd love to, Mila said, perhaps too quickly. They arranged details, a small Italian restaurant Scott knew, and after hanging up, Mila sat at her desk, conflicted. She needed to tell him the truth, but the thought of seeing his expression change when he learned who she really was made her stomach twist. Just one more date, she told herself. One more night of being just Mila, not Mila Blackley, CEO and Business Magazine cover subject. The next evening, Mila once again parked away from their meeting spot and dressed down in jeans and a simple blouse. The restaurant was charming red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, and the aroma of garlic and tomato sauce in the air. Scott was waiting outside, looking slightly more polished than before but still casually dressed. His face lit up when he saw her, and Mila felt that flutter again. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thank you. You clean up pretty nicely yourself." She nodded toward the restaurant. "So how did you find this place?" "It's actually where I took Sophie for her 5th birthday. The owner makes a special heart-shaped pizza for kids." He held the door for her. "Their regular food is excellent too, I promise." Inside, they were led to a cozy corner table. Scott pulled out Mila's chair, a small gesture that felt both old-fashioned and sweet. Over wine and pasta, they delved deeper into their lives. Scott talked about growing up in a small town, his college years studying computer science, and how becoming a father had changed everything. "After Amanda left, I was terrified," he admitted. "I had no idea how to raise a little girl on my own, but you figure it out day by day. Now I can braid hair and discuss the relative merits of different Disney princesses with authority." Mila smiled. "Which princess is the winner?" "Officially, it's Mona this week, but that changes regularly." He twirled pasta onto his fork. "What about you? Any family in Seattle?" Mila shook her head. "My parents are in Chicago. I moved here for work about 6 years ago." This, at least, was true. "They keep asking when I'm going to settle down, have kids, the usual parental pressure." "And is that something you want? Eventually, I mean." The question caught her off guard with its directness. "I think so," she said thoughtfully. "I've always been focused on my career, but lately I've been feeling like there should be more to life than just work." Scott nodded. "Having Sophie made me realize that. Before her, I was all about climbing the corporate ladder, working insane hours. Now my priorities are different." He hesitated. "Not that I've given up on professional goals. It's just they're not the only things that matter anymore." As they talked, Mila found herself revealing more and more genuine details about her life, her love of early morning runs along the waterfront, her terrible cooking skills, her secret addiction to cheesy romantic comedies. The lies were primarily about her career and financial status, but the person she was presenting felt surprisingly authentic. When the check came, Scott again insisted on paying. Mila noticed him checking the total carefully before adding the tip, not with anxiety, but with the mindfulness of someone who tracked his expenses. After dinner, they strolled through a nearby park, the pathways lit by ornamental lamps. Under a gazebo strung with fairy lights, Scott stopped and turned to her. "I have a confession to make," he said, his expression serious. Mila's heart sank. Had he recognized her? Had someone from her company seen them? "I really like you, Mila, more than I expected to after just 2 dates." His voice was low, sincere. "And that kind of scares me because Sophie is always my first priority. Dating as a single parent, it's complicated." Relief flooded through her. "I understand that," she said, "and I respect it completely." "The thing is," he continued, taking her hands in his, "I'd like to keep seeing you, but I need to be upfront about my situation. I'm not wealthy. My job pays the bills, we have a comfortable life, but luxury vacations and fancy restaurants aren't part of our regular routine. I'm still paying off student loans, and I'm saving for Sophie's college fund." He smiled ruefully. Not exactly a dream scenario for most women. Mila felt a stab of guilt so sharp it was almost physical. Here he was, laying out his vulnerabilities, while she continued her charade. "Scott, that doesn't matter to me," she said, meaning it with all her heart. "I care about who you are, not what you can afford." He searched her face for a moment, then leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Instead, she closed the distance between them, and when their lips met, Mila felt something click into place, a sensation of rightness that both thrilled and terrified her. The kiss deepened, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Scott rested his forehead against hers. "I'm really glad you swiped right," he murmured, making her laugh. As they walked back toward the restaurant where Scott had parked, Mila made a decision. Their next date, she would tell him everything. The thought sent anxiety coursing through her, but she pushed it aside. If whatever was growing between them was real, it needed to be based on truth. Over the next week, they talked daily. Scott sent her pictures of Sophie's latest art projects and funny anecdotes about their father-daughter adventures. Mila found herself sharing details of her day, carefully edited to fit her cover story, but otherwise honest. Each conversation made her feel more connected to him and more conflicted about her deception. For their third date, Scott invited her to a community center where a local jazz band was playing. "Not exactly the symphony," he said apologetically over the phone, "but they're actually really good, and tickets are reasonable." "It sounds perfect," Mila assured him, thinking of the symphony box seats her company maintained that she could access anytime. The community center was transformed for the evening with mood lighting and small cafe tables. The band was indeed talented, playing a mixture of standards and original compositions. Scott knew some of the musicians, explaining that one was a neighbor and another taught Sophie's weekend music class. "It's one of the things I love about our neighborhood," he said. "There's this real sense of community." During intermission, they stepped outside for fresh air. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Mila knew this was the moment. She took a deep breath. "Scott, there's something I need to tell you." His expression grew concerned. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," but she faltered, then pushed ahead. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. I'm not just a web developer. I'm the CEO of Blackley Tech." She watched his face carefully, seeing confusion, then recognition dawn. "Wait, Mila Blackley. The Mila Blackley? Your company was just featured in Tech Monthly." She nodded, anxiety coiling in her stomach. "I'm sorry for not telling you sooner." "It's just that in the past, when men found out about my position, it changed things. Either they were intimidated or they were only interested in what I could do for them." Scott was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he ran a hand through his hair. "So the other night, when I gave that whole speech about not being wealthy, I felt terrible," Mila admitted. "You were being so honest and I was still hiding the truth." "Why tell me now?" "Because I care about you," she said simply. "And whatever happens between us, I want it to be real." Scott leaned against the building, processing. "I understand why you did it," he said finally. "I don't love being lied to, but I get it." He looked at her directly. "Does this change how you feel about me?" "Not at all," Mila said firmly. "If anything, I admire you more now that I know the whole story. The way you've created this wonderful life for Sophie, how you balance everything, it's amazing, Scott." He stepped closer to her. "And what about the fact that I can't take you to 5-star restaurants or buy you expensive gifts?" "Do you really think that matters to me?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "We come from different worlds, Mila, maybe on the surface, but I think where it counts, we're not so different." She reached for his hand. "I like you, Scott. The real you, the devoted dad who learns constellations and braids hair and works hard to give his daughter a good life. That's the person I'm interested in knowing better." He studied her face, then slowly smiled. "Well, I guess the silver lining is I don't have to worry about picking affordable date spots anymore." Mila laughed, relief washing over her. "Actually, I've really enjoyed our dates. They've been more meaningful than any fancy dinner I've had." Scott pulled her close. "So, CEO Mila Blackley, would you like to come to a first-grade soccer game this Saturday? Sophie's playing, and she's been asking when she gets to meet you." Mila's heart soared. "I'd be honored." He kissed her then, under the stars, and Mila knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, this connection was worth fighting for. Saturday arrived with perfect fall weather, crisp and sunny. Mila dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, nervous about meeting Sophie. She brought a small gift, a sketchbook and professional colored pencils she hoped would support the girls' artistic interests without seeming excessive. The soccer field was filled with parents on sidelines, cheering on tiny players in oversized jerseys. Mila spotted Scott immediately, towering over most of the other parents, his attention fixed on the field. "Hey," she said, approaching him, his face brightened. "You made it, they just started." He pointed to a small figure in a blue jersey, dark pigtails bouncing as she ran determinedly after the ball. "Number 7, that's our star player." Mila watched as Sophie managed to kick the ball a few feet before another child intercepted it. "She's got good form," she said, making Scott laugh. "That's being generous, but I appreciate it." Throughout the game, Mila observed Scott cheering enthusiastically for every child on the field, not just his daughter. He seemed to know all the parents, exchanging friendly words with everyone around them. When Sophie looked to the sidelines, he gave her a thumbs up that made her beam with pride. After the game, which ended in a 1-1 tie, though no one seemed to be keeping strict score, Sophie ran over, her face flushed with exertion and excitement. "Daddy, did you see me kick the ball?" "I sure did, sweetheart. You were amazing." Scott knelt to her level. "Sophie, I want you to meet my friend Mila." The little girl turned her attention to Mila, studying her with frank curiosity. She had Scott's dark hair and something of his expression, but her eyes were a different color hazel rather than his deep brown. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" she asked directly. Scott coughed. "Sophie, remember we talked about. It's okay," Mila said, smiling as she crouched down to Sophie's eye level. "Your dad and I are friends who enjoy spending time together. I've heard a lot about you, Sophie. Your dad tells me you're quite the artist." Sophie nodded seriously. "I'm going to be a famous painter someday, or maybe an astronaut who paints in space." "That sounds like an excellent plan." Mila offered the package. "I brought you something. Your dad mentioned you like to draw." Sophie's eyes widened as she opened the gift. "Daddy, look, real artist pencils." She looked up at Mila with new appreciation. "Thank you, can I try them now?" "After we get lunch," Scott said. "How about the diner? Mila's joining us if that's okay with you." "Do they have milkshakes?" Sophie asked Mila, as if she might have inside information on the diner's menu. "I'm not sure, but if they do, that sounds like a perfect post-soccer celebration." Sophie nodded approvingly and slipped her small hand into Mila's with the easy trust of childhood. "You can sit next to me," she declared. Over lunch at a family-friendly diner, which did indeed have milkshakes, Mila found herself charmed by the father-daughter dynamic. Scott was patient but firm, encouraging Sophie to tell Mila about school but redirecting her when she started to dominate the conversation. Sophie, for her part, was bright and inquisitive, asking Mila dozens of questions. "Do you have a little girl?" "No, I don't have any children." "Why not?" "Sophie," Scott warned gently. "It's okay," Mila assured him before turning back to Sophie. "I guess I haven't met the right person to have a family with yet." Sophie considered this while slurping her chocolate milkshake. "My mom didn't want to be a mom anymore, so she left, but Daddy says that's okay because we have each other." Mila felt her heart constrict at the matter-of-fact way Sophie stated this. "Your dad is pretty special," she said. "He makes the best pancakes," Sophie agreed, "and he never forgets to check for monsters under the bed." After lunch, Sophie insisted on showing Mila her new pencil's capabilities, creating an elaborate drawing of the three of them holding hands with a sun smiling overhead. Mila noticed she drew Mila's hair much longer than it actually was, and with a crown perched on top. "Is that me?" she asked, pointing to the crown figure. "Yup, you're a queen like in my books. Daddy says you're a CEO, which means you're the boss of everybody at work, which is kind of like a queen." Scott looked embarrassed. "I was explaining what a CEO does," he clarified. Mila laughed. "Well, it's not quite the same as being royalty, but I do like your interpretation, Sophie." As the afternoon wore on, they went to a nearby park where Sophie played on the swings while Scott and Mila sat on a bench watching her. "She's wonderful," Mila said sincerely. "She seems to like you too," Scott replied, looking pleased. "I haven't introduced her to anyone I've dated since her mom left. It never felt right before." The implication hung in the air between them that with Mila, somehow, it did feel right. Over the following weeks, Mila found herself increasingly integrated into Scott and Sophie's life. Movie nights at their modest but comfortable two-bedroom apartment. Sunday morning pancakes that Scott insisted lived up to Sophie's hype. Helping Sophie with an ambitious art project that covered their dining table for days. Scott had been initially hesitant about visiting Mila's downtown penthouse, but eventually relented. Sophie had been wide-eyed at the floor-to-ceiling windows and vast open space. "It's like a castle in the sky," she had exclaimed, running from room to room. Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep on Mila's sofa, Scott had admitted his discomfort. "I can't give you this kind of life, Mila." "I don't need you to," she'd assured him. "This is just where I live, it's not who I am." As months passed, their relationship deepened. Mila learned to navigate the complexities of dating a single-father understanding when Sophie needed to come first, supporting Scott through parenting challenges, finding her own role in their established dynamic. Scott, for his part, made space for Mila's demanding career, never making her feel guilty about late meetings or work emergencies. One evening, nearly 6 months after their first date, Mila arrived at Scott's apartment to find Sophie already in pajamas, bouncing with excitement. "Daddy's taking you on a special date," she announced. "And I'm sleeping at Aunt Jenny's house." Scott appeared from the kitchen, looking slightly flustered. "That was supposed to be a surprise, Soph." "Oops," Sophie said, not looking particularly sorry. After dropping Sophie at Scott's sister's house, he drove them to the waterfront park where they'd walked on their first date. The night was clear but chilly, and Scott seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "Remember when we came here the first time?" he asked as they strolled along the path. "Of course, you were teaching me about constellations." "I was trying to impress you," he admitted with a laugh. "I'd actually just learned them the week before." They reached the gazebo where they'd shared their first kiss, now decorated with twinkling lights, and Mila realized with a start scattered rose petals. "Scott, what's going on?" He took both her hands in his. "Mila, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought so much joy to me and to Sophie." His voice grew husky with emotion. "You came into our lives when I wasn't looking for love, but somehow you fit perfectly into the spaces I didn't even know were empty." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Mila's breath caught as he dropped to one knee. "I know this is fast," he said, "but when you know, you know. I love you, Mila. Not your success or your status, but the woman who sits through animated movies with Sophie, who burns toast every time she tries to make breakfast, who works tirelessly for what she believes in." He opened the box, revealing a modest but beautiful diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Mila's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Scott slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to kiss her, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I should tell you," he said. "I saved for months for that ring. Sophie helped me pick it out." Mila looked at the ring, sparkling in the fairy lights. "It's perfect. Absolutely perfect." 1 year later, Mila stood in the backyard of their new home, a comfortable 4-bedroom house halfway between Scott's work and her office, watching Sophie direct the setup for their small wedding reception. At 8, Sophie had appointed herself assistant wedding planner and taken the role very seriously. "The flowers go there," she instructed Scott's brother, who was helping arrange centerpieces. Mila said they need to catch the light. Mila felt arms encircle her from behind and leaned back into Scott's embrace. "Our daughter is quite the taskmaster," he murmured, kissing her temple. "Our daughter." The word still gave Mila a thrill. Sophie had asked if Mila could adopt her legally after the wedding, and the papers were already being processed. "She gets that from me," Mila said with a smile. "Poor child never stood a chance with both of us as parents." Scott turned her in his arms. "Any regrets?" About marrying a regular software engineer with a bossy daughter, Mila pretended to consider. "Well, I did have offers from several billionaires and a minor European royal." He tickled her sides, making her laugh. "Smart-aleck." "Not a single regret," she said sincerely, reaching up to touch his face. "You saw me for who I really am, Scott. Not the CEO, not the success story, just me. That's worth more than any amount of money." "Even when I pretended to be broke to test you," he teased, referencing their first date. "You weren't pretending," she reminded him. "And neither was I in the ways that mattered." Across the yard, Sophie waved frantically. "Daddy, Mila, come see if the arch looks right for the ceremony." "Duty calls," Scott said, taking Mila's hand as they walked toward their future together, step by step, just as they had from the beginning.